Today, we're going to look at the album Rocks by Aerosmith. So Rocks is the fourth album from Aerosmith. It was released in 1976 and came right after the album Toys in the Attic. Now, Toys in the Attic had been a huge commercial success. It had sold tons and tons of records, and everybody was listening to Walk This Way. No matter how annoying it was, everybody was listening to that song. So this album, based upon the sales from the third album, was actually one of the first albums to ship platinum when it was released. And it has since gone on to sell quadruple platinum, which means this album has sold over 4 million copies. This album has been considered very influential to bands all over, ranging everywhere from Metallica to Nirvana to Guns N' Roses. And when I was researching this album, I came across a story told by Slash, the lead guitarist for Guns N' Roses. Slash said that he was in about the 7th grade and he was listening to The Cars and Cheap Trick and that kind of stuff. But there was this older girl in the neighborhood that he kind of had a crush on, and he kept flirting with her, well, kind of hitting on her. Kept hoping that he could get her, And so one day, she finally let him come over to her apartment. He goes over, and she puts on this album, Aerosmith Rocks. Slash said he was mesmerized by the album. He said that he must have listened to that record 6 times straight through, and then he got on his bike and went home and decided he was going to be a guitar player. Forgot all about the girl. And this album impacted him that much. So my story isn't quite as good a story as Slash's. There's no older chick or anything like that. And the album didn't make me go out and become a world famous guitarist. So my story starts in 1976. I'm a junior in high school. My dumb buddies and I were dumb jocks, and we forgot to go back to class after lunch. And we were at this guy Dave's house, and we were in a modified state of consciousness, which happened a lot between lunchtime and football practice. And so we were listening to the tunes, and David just bought this new album by Aerosmith. He put it on. Now, I've been into Aerosmith a little bit. I liked usually 1 or 2 songs off every album. The first album, I liked Mamakin, and I also liked, of course, Dream On. The second album, no doubt about it, Train Kept a Rollin'. Still my favorite Aerosmith song of all time, which is actually a cover of a cover, but anyhow, you get the idea. The third album, I hated Walk This Way. I did like the song Round and Round. So I figure, okay, there's probably one good song on this album. So this album goes on the turntable, and whoa, this album was not like any other Aerosmith album ever. This album really hit me hard. Was it my modified state of consciousness? Who knows? We'll never know. But I turned to my buddy Roy and I said, dude, this is the future of heavy metal. You see, this album had a different sound than anything we'd heard from Aerosmith before. It was a darker sound, a heavier sound. If we all admit it, Toys in the Attic was a little bit overproduced. It was kind of made for radio play. This was heavy metal. And the first 2 songs on the album set the tone. The first song on the album is Back in the Saddle. It starts out with a real slow build and turns into a real rock and roll song. It's just perfect when you're in that modified state of consciousness. If you listen real closely, you'll hear what sounds like galloping horses, and later a bullwhip. The story goes that the guys were trying to get the sound of a real bullwhip to crack. All they did was kept cutting themselves as they were trying to make it crack, and they couldn't quite do it, and the whip would come back and they would open up a cut on themselves. They finally got the sound they were looking for with a cap gun making that pop. Interesting. The sound of all those spurs, that's Steven Tyler walking around with tambourines taped to his legs. Like I said, kind of a weird song. Now, The second song on this album is what I consider the one to really, really make the album, and that's Last Child. Now, Last Child has a riff that's haunting, and I'm no musical expert, right? I'm a gearhead, ex-jock kind of guy who likes rock and roll. Now, Last Child does not normally fall into something that I would like, but the chord progression and the riff, they're just amazing. And I think that's the song from the album. Now, after this album, Aerosmith kind of went downhill. They never were ever really able to capture the metal sound that they did on Rocks. So what do I think of this record? 2 thumbs up! I think this is the best Aerosmith album. I think it's the last Aerosmith album worth listening to. If you got it, dust it off and play it. If you're at the flea market and you see it, buy it. Put it on your turntable. However you get it there, you're going to like this album. It's not like later Aerosmith albums. This is a really good rock and roll heavy metal record.